The bye weeks have arrived, and that means streaming and stashing is more important than ever. Every week, I'll be bringing you a video answering two simple questions. Who should I stream this week, and who should I stash for the future? On the Fantasy First Down. I'm Ben Wasley. Welcome to the Fantasy First Down. With bye weeks in full action, it is time to talk about streamers and stashes. If you haven't already, make sure you like and subscribe on YouTube. Plus, if you've got any questions, hit us up in the comments, or you can ask them over on Instagram at the Fantasy First Down or on Twitter at Fantasy First Down with no O. We'll start things off with the quarterbacks, and Jared Goff has just one top 20 finish so far this season, but he's a strong start this week against the struggling Bengals. The Lions are projected to have the week's highest score, and Cincinnati is a top 10 quarterback matchup. If you're rostering Goff, and that's a questionable choice at this stage, now is the time to start him or drop him. Meanwhile, last week I recommended stashing Jackson Dart in order to start him this week if his debut went well. Well, the rookie showed a strong rushing floor in a surprise debut win over the unbeaten Chargers. This week, he goes up against the winless Saints and is a good chance of putting up a solid total, though there is always a risk the Giants just run out the game as they did last week against LA. I'm starting him in a couple of leagues where I've got players on bye, and I think he could be solid. Meanwhile, if you need some deeper streamers, well, there's always Sam Darnold against the Buccaneers and Cooper Rush if you're really desperate against the Texans. Meanwhile, quarterback stashes, and hopefully get into this before the Rams game starts, which is going to be tight. The Rams face a susceptible Ravens in week 6, and Matthew Stafford is starting to hit his stride. The veteran was the QB2 last week against the Colts when I listed him as a streamer, but this week I'm holding him for a rainy day, which could come soon if you're relying on a Lamar Jackson, Brock Purdy, or CJ Stroud, who are all in risk of missing next week as well. Meanwhile, running backs and the Browns have been given rookie runner Quinshon Judkins all that he can eat, with 45 involvements across the last 2 games. This week, they face a Vikings team who is best attacked on the ground. That has Judkins written all over it. Meanwhile, week 4 showed a clear changing of the guard, with Nick Chubb losing touches to one of my favorite preseason rookies and week 3 stash, Woody Marks. And Marks did not disappoint, totally outplaying his veteran teammate. This week, he faces the league's best running back matchup in the Ravens, meaning he's a must-start if you're struggling for a runner. Elsewhere, the Lions have significantly changed their running back usage this season, moving away from a true committee and leaning more heavily on Jahmyr Gibbs. But week 3's wild running back 2 finish, which lost me a matchup by a point, and I'm not bitter or anything like that, showed the bigger back can still have his good weeks in the right matchups. And this week, against the Bengals, is one of those. Detroit is a very heavy favorite, and the Bengals have conceded the second most points to running backs this season. Monty is a risky but feasible start. And with Trey Benson hitting IR, if you need a backup, well, Michael Carter is an option because he is the new early down back in Arizona. I'd really only start him if I'm badly hurting at the position. Not a lot of people are also picking up Amari Demercado. I expect him to be the receiving back, but it's not impossible. He's the main back, and Carter is more of a change of pace guy. But I do think they probably give Carter the early work. That's how they've done things in the past. Meanwhile, running back stashes and Braylon Allen appears headed to injured reserve. In fact, I think at this stage he is there, opening up an opportunity for Isaiah Davis to be the clear backup in New York. That makes Davis a desperation flex option, but a strong handcuff to Breece Hall. And as we know, running backs get injured more than any other player in fantasy, with the average top 36 running back missing multiple games in every season. For that reason, your best bet in fantasy is to roster running backs who are an injury away from an every down role. Each week, I'm listing my favorite running back stashes, only including players you won't be starting most weeks. As always, my favorite is Zach Charbonnet, but Rashad White is an excellent option. Looks like he may even be starting this week with Bucky Irving battling an injury. Blake Corin and Kendre Miller have started to kind of get opportunities to take over the lead roles in LA and in New Orleans, respectively. Admittedly, Corin is playing today, so that's going to make life a lot harder to actually pick him up. Kareem Hunt actually had more carries than Isaiah Pacheco last week. I don't necessarily see that happening going forward, but if you need a handcuff that has a good chance of becoming the starter, Hunt is in with a chance, even though I think that's going to be an ugly committee regardless, and Rashad White's getting involved too. Brian Robinson has arguably the most upside. We know how good the 49ers run offense can be and how they just focus on one player, and that would be Robinson. Ollie Gordon is the clear backup for the Dolphins. And if you've seen the Achane injury, which is always possible, he's quite small, then Gordon would be the guy to own. Same thing for the Colts. DJ Giddens seems to be the clear backup to JT. And we know how much they love to run the ball and how much they focus on one guy in Indy. RJ Harvey had a good week last week, and I've moved him onto this list. I still think the upside's a little bit capped by the Broncos' run offense, but he's a solid option. Isaiah Davis I already talked about. Bashal Tutin is a solid option, but nothing more than being a solid option. You would need an injury to EDN, and even then, it's going to be a bit of a committee. He's more of a mid-range running back too, which is why I'm not that excited about him. Same issue with Rico Dowdle as well, even though you're actually going to get some bye week production from him a lot of weeks. And Ty Johnson appears to be the Bills' backup over Ray Davis at the moment, but I kind of want to see a little bit more of that where they actually move the ball a little bit with their backups before I really commit to that idea of him being the handcuff. Wide receiver-wise, let's talk streamers. It's hard to trust in Colts receivers, but Michael Pittman gets a juicy top 3 matchup against the Raiders this week. That's enough for me to take a punt on starting him in week 5, despite some inefficiency and inconsistency this season. Meanwhile, I'm normally against starting receivers against the Panthers about as much as I'm against starting Jalen Waddle in general. But with Tyreek Hill out for the season and maybe more, Waddle becomes an every week starter until future notice. Just know that he's a risky one this week. Meanwhile, the devastating ACL injury to Malik Neighbors also opens up opportunities, in this case for Giants receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson is likely to be the main beneficiary as his snaps jump following the Neighbors injury. And he was already a target magnet before his teammate went down. He's likely a solid PPR start most weeks now, but that's especially the case this week against the mediocre Saints. And finally, I was against starting Trey Tucker last week against the Colts. Just wasn't a great matchup. But this week against the Colts, who are very susceptible to downfield threats, I'm all about taking a shot on the Raiders' deep guy. So Tucker's in this week for me, even though he was out last week and is probably going to be out most weeks. Meanwhile, with stashes, and I've been around long enough to know you can't trust Darius Slayton just because he's high on the depth chart. After all, he was playing pretty much every snap even before the Malik Neighbors injury, but he has gotten more evolved over the last fortnight. So I'd like to snap him up just in case that grows into an actual role with Neighbors out. I know a lot of you would have picked him up off waivers. Now it's not the time to start it. Likewise, Cedric Tillman's trip to IR opens up an opportunity for controversial rookie receiver Isaiah Bond. He's slowly risen up the depth chart this season, is likely now the wide receiver 2, although Jamari Thrash is kind of involved as well. Heck, he may even have been that without the Tillman injury. Tillman was starting to fade a little bit. Very disappointing because I was excited about him in the preseason. Bond is a worthwhile pickup in deeper leagues as he has more upside than most on waivers in those leagues. Meanwhile, for tight ends, and Evan Ingram was an every down tight end last season based on his volume, but this year he is not. It's Brenton Strange getting the same treatment for the Jaguars. He's a viable PPR streamer most weeks, and I do use him regularly. But with Tucker Kraft and Kyle Pitts on bye, he increases in value in week 5. Meanwhile, when a player gets 16 snaps the week before, I'm very wary of starting them. But Darren Waller parlayed that into a 4-target, 3-catch, and 2-touchdown debut for a Dolphins team that now lacks target hog Tyreek Hill. I think that Waller's a viable start against a Panthers team that is a top 6 tight end matchup. Arguably, really, he's the number 3 option behind Achane and Waddle, although I do think we see a little bit of Malik Washington and Nick Westbrook-Ikhine. Meanwhile, for tight end stashes, and the Malik Neighbors injury will cause an adjustment in the Giants' target distribution, though we don't know yet who that's going to benefit. Theo Johnson is an every down tight end who gets targeted at an alarmingly low rate. That could all change with the absence of his stud teammate, though. I'm willing to stash him to find out. Meanwhile, for kickers, and I'm back on the Spencer Strader train, as I was last week. Hopefully still have the season's top scorer after I talked about him in last week's video, because he's in for a very juicy kicker matchup against the Raiders in week 5. Meanwhile, veteran Seahawks kicker Jason Myers is quietly the kicker number 3 on the season. This week, I'm expecting another good outing against the Bucs. As for DSTs, and when I suggested streaming the Lions DST last week, they were the 23rd highest scoring defense on the year. After that one game, they're now the DST4. And it only gets better with a great matchup against the insipid Bengals and the struggling Jake Browning. Meanwhile, the Vikings-Browns game is expected to be an error-filled slugfest, so I'll be targeting both DSTs. Assuming the Vikings aren't available in your league, which they're probably not, the Browns are a viable substitute that are available in most. And that's all we've got for week 5 streamers and stashes. If you've got any questions, pop them below or hit us up on my socials. Please make sure you like and subscribe. And if you need to check out my rankings, ffdfantasyfootball.com is the place to go. I look forward to seeing you guys in a couple of days for my starts and sits show.